Question 1. The efficiency study reveals that streamlining the admissions process by reducing the number of essay-based questions on the Ahlia University entrance exam could significantly decrease grading time and associated costs. However, concerns have been raised about whether this change might inadvertently disadvantage students who excel in written communication and critical analysis, potentially impacting the diversity of the incoming cohort. Which of the following approaches best addresses this implementation challenge? Option A. Increase the weight of multiple-choice questions to compensate for the reduced essay component, ensuring the overall difficulty of the exam remains consistent. Option B. Conduct a pilot study with a subset of applicants to assess the impact of reduced essay questions on applicant assessment and academic preparedness before a full-scale implementation. Option C. Postpone any changes to the exam format until a comprehensive review of the entire admissions process, including all assessment methods, can be completed. Option D. Implement the reduction in essay questions immediately to realize cost savings, with a plan to monitor applicant performance in subsequent academic years. Correct answer is D. Implement the reduction in essay questions immediately to realize cost savings, with a plan to monitor applicant performance in subsequent academic years. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the university's operational efficiency goals with the ethical imperative to provide accurate and accessible information to prospective students. The entrance exam process is a critical gateway, and any misrepresentation or misleading information can have significant consequences for applicants' educational futures and the university's reputation. Careful judgment is required to ensure that efficiency measures do not compromise fairness or transparency. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the proposed changes by the relevant academic and administrative committees, ensuring alignment with Ahlia University's established admissions policies and any applicable regulatory guidelines for higher education institutions. This process should include an assessment of the impact on student experience and the integrity of the admissions process. Regulatory justification lies in adhering to principles of fairness, transparency, and due diligence in admissions, which are fundamental to maintaining academic standards and institutional credibility. An incorrect approach that prioritizes immediate cost savings without considering the impact on the quality or fairness of the admissions process is professionally unacceptable. This would fail to uphold the ethical duty to prospective students and could violate implicit or explicit university policies regarding admissions integrity. Another incorrect approach that involves bypassing established review procedures to implement changes quickly, even if seemingly beneficial for efficiency, undermines good governance and can lead to unintended negative consequences. This disregards the importance of collegial decision-making and oversight, which are crucial for maintaining institutional standards and preventing errors or biases. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the core objective efficiency. This must then be weighed against potential impacts on stakeholders, students, faculty, administration, and adherence to established policies and ethical principles. A structured review process, involving relevant committees and stakeholders, is essential to evaluate proposed changes comprehensively. This ensures that decisions are informed, defensible, and aligned with the university's mission and regulatory obligations. Question 2. Stakeholder feedback indicates that during the recent Ahlia University entrance exam, there were reports of potential procedural irregularities in one of the examination centers. These reports suggest that some candidates may have had access to unauthorized materials, and there are concerns about the adequacy of invigilation in that specific location. The university's examination committee needs to decide on the most appropriate course of action to address these allegations, while ensuring the integrity and fairness of the entire entrance examination process. Option A. Immediately disqualify all candidates who sat for the examination at the suspected center, based solely on the initial reports, without verifying the extent of the alleged procedural breaches or individual culpability. Option B. Initiate a thorough, documented investigation into the specific allegations at the reported examination center, gathering evidence and interviewing relevant personnel, before making any decisions regarding the exam's validity or candidate results. Option C. Publicly announce that the entire entrance examination will be invalidated and rescheduled due to the reported irregularities, without conducting a detailed investigation into the scope or impact of the alleged issues. Option D. Issue a general statement to all candidates acknowledging the feedback, but deferring any action until a later date, without outlining a clear plan for investigation or resolution. The correct answer is B. Initiate a thorough, documented investigation into the specific allegations at the reported examination center, gathering evidence and interviewing relevant personnel, before making any decisions regarding the exam's validity or candidate results. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the university's commitment to academic integrity with the need to respond effectively to student concerns, all while adhering to the specific regulations and guidelines governing Ahlia University's entrance examinations. The core difficulty lies in determining the appropriate course of action when faced with allegations of procedural irregularities that could impact the fairness and validity of the exam. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any response is both proportionate and compliant with established protocols. The correct approach involves a systematic and documented investigation into the alleged irregularities. This means gathering evidence, interviewing relevant parties, and assessing the impact of any confirmed issues on the examination's integrity. The justification for this approach lies in upholding the principles of fairness and transparency mandated by the university's examination regulations. A thorough investigation ensures that decisions are evidence-based and that any necessary corrective actions are implemented in a manner that respects the rights of all candidates and maintains the credibility of the entrance exam process. This aligns with the ethical obligation to conduct examinations impartially and to address any breaches of procedure rigorously. An incorrect approach would be to dismiss the feedback without proper investigation. This fails to acknowledge the university's responsibility to address student concerns and could lead to a perception of unfairness or a lack of accountability. Ethically, it violates the principle of due process and could undermine trust in the examination system. Another incorrect approach would be to immediately implement broad, unverified sanctions against all candidates based on unsubstantiated claims. This is procedurally unsound and ethically problematic, as it punishes individuals without due process and could disproportionately affect innocent candidates. It also fails to adhere to the university's established disciplinary procedures, which likely require evidence of wrongdoing before sanctions are applied. A further incorrect approach would be to delay the response significantly without communicating any interim steps. This can exacerbate student anxiety and erode confidence in the university's ability to manage its examinations effectively. It demonstrates a lack of responsiveness and can be seen as a failure to uphold the university's commitment to a fair and timely examination process. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes evidence, procedural fairness, and regulatory compliance. This involves 1. Acknowledging and documenting all feedback received. 2. Initiating a formal investigation process as outlined in the university's examination regulations. 3. Gathering and analyzing all relevant evidence objectively. 4. Consulting with relevant university authorities and legal counsel if necessary. 5. Making decisions based on the findings of the investigation, ensuring that any actions taken are proportionate, fair, and compliant with all applicable rules. 6. Communicating the process and outcomes transparently to stakeholders. Question 3. When evaluating an applicant's submission for the Ahlia University entrance exam, and a suspicion of plagiarism arises from a submitted essay, what is the most appropriate course of action to ensure fairness and adherence to academic integrity standards? Option A. Immediately reject the application based on the suspicion of plagiarism to maintain the integrity of the exam process. Option B. Overlook the suspicion of plagiarism if the applicant is otherwise highly qualified and the university has admission targets to meet. Option C. Confront the applicant directly with the accusation and demand an immediate confession or denial. Option D. Conduct a thorough investigation, gather evidence, provide the applicant with an opportunity to respond to the allegations, and then make a decision based on university policy. The correct answer is D. Conduct a thorough investigation, gather evidence, provide the applicant with an opportunity to respond to the allegations, and then make a decision based on university policy. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to navigate the ethical and regulatory landscape of academic integrity while also considering the practical implications of university policy. The core tension lies in balancing the university's commitment to fair assessment with the need to address potential breaches of academic honesty. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any action taken is both procedurally fair to the student and upholds the standards expected by Ahlia University. The correct approach involves a thorough and impartial investigation into the alleged plagiarism. This means gathering all relevant evidence, providing the student with an opportunity to respond to the allegations, and then making a decision based on established university procedures and academic integrity guidelines. This approach is correct because it adheres to the principles of due process and natural justice, which are fundamental to any fair disciplinary process. Ahlia University's entrance exam regulations, like those of most academic institutions, would mandate such a process to ensure that accusations are substantiated and that students are treated equitably. This upholds the university's commitment to academic honesty and the integrity of its admissions process. An incorrect approach would be to immediately dismiss the application based on suspicion alone, without any investigation or opportunity for the student to explain. This fails to meet the basic requirements of fairness and due process. It also risks penalizing a student based on an unsubstantiated claim, which is ethically problematic and likely violates university policy regarding disciplinary actions. Another incorrect approach would be to overlook the alleged plagiarism due to the competitive nature of university admissions or the desire to fill a quota. This is a serious ethical failure as it compromises the integrity of the admissions process and undermines the principle of meritocracy. It also sets a dangerous precedent, suggesting that rules can be bent or ignored for expediency, which is contrary to the regulatory framework governing academic institutions. A further incorrect approach would be to confront the student in an accusatory manner without following established procedures or providing them with the right to a fair hearing. This can be intimidating and may lead to an unfair outcome. It also bypasses the structured investigation process designed to ensure that all facts are considered objectively. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a commitment to understanding and applying the specific regulations and guidelines of Ahlia University. This includes familiarizing oneself with the university's policies on academic integrity, admissions procedures, and disciplinary actions. When faced with a potential breach, the professional should initiate a formal investigation, document all steps taken, ensure all parties have a chance to be heard, and make a decision based on the evidence and established policies. If unsure about the interpretation of a policy, seeking guidance from the relevant university department or authority is crucial. Question 4. Stakeholder feedback indicates a concern that the current scoring of the Ahlia University entrance exam may inadvertently disadvantage applicants from specific socioeconomic backgrounds, potentially limiting the diversity of the incoming cohort. The admissions committee is considering how to address this feedback while strictly adhering to the regulatory framework governing the exam. Which of the following represents the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Advise stakeholders that the exam scoring is fixed and cannot be altered, and that all applicants must be evaluated solely on their raw exam scores as per existing regulations. Option B. Propose a formal review of the admissions policy and exam scoring criteria, seeking to identify any unintended biases and exploring permissible adjustments that align with the university's commitment to diversity and the exam's regulatory framework. Option C. Immediately implement a revised scoring system that assigns bonus points to applicants from identified socioeconomic backgrounds to increase diversity. Option D. Suggest that the university consider alternative admission pathways that bypass the entrance exam for certain applicant groups to achieve diversity goals. The correct answer is B. Propose a formal review of the admissions policy and exam scoring criteria, seeking to identify any unintended biases and exploring permissible adjustments that align with the university's commitment to diversity and the exam's regulatory framework. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the university's desire to attract a diverse student body and the need to maintain academic integrity and fairness in the admissions process. The admissions committee must balance the stated goals of inclusivity with the established criteria for evaluating candidates, ensuring that any adjustments do not compromise the validity of the entrance exam or create an unfair advantage. The core of the challenge lies in interpreting and applying the Ahlia University entrance exam's regulatory framework, which likely emphasizes meritocratic selection and equal opportunity, while also considering the broader institutional objectives. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the existing admissions policy and the specific guidelines for the Ahlia University entrance exam. This approach prioritizes adherence to the established regulatory framework, which dictates the criteria for admission and the process for evaluating applicants. Any proposed changes or considerations for specific groups must be evaluated against these regulations to ensure they are permissible and do not undermine the fairness or validity of the exam. The ethical justification stems from the principle of equal treatment and the commitment to a transparent and objective admissions process, as likely mandated by the university's charter and the exam's governing regulations. This approach ensures that decisions are defensible, consistent, and uphold the integrity of the university's academic standards. An incorrect approach would be to unilaterally implement a revised scoring mechanism or introduce preferential treatment for certain applicant groups without a formal review and approval process that aligns with the exam's regulatory framework. This could lead to accusations of bias, unfairness, and a potential breach of the university's own admissions policies. Such an action would fail to consider the established procedures for policy modification and could undermine the credibility of the entrance exam. Another incorrect approach would be to disregard the stakeholder feedback entirely, failing to engage in a constructive dialogue about potential improvements or adjustments. This would be a missed opportunity to enhance the admissions process and could lead to continued dissatisfaction among stakeholders, potentially impacting the university's reputation and its ability to attract a diverse and qualified applicant pool. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic evaluation of the feedback received, a comprehensive understanding of the relevant regulatory framework and university policies, and a collaborative approach to finding solutions. This includes identifying the specific concerns raised, assessing their validity in light of existing regulations, exploring potential solutions that are compliant and ethically sound, and engaging in appropriate consultation and approval processes before implementing any changes. The focus should always be on upholding academic integrity, ensuring fairness, and acting in accordance with the established governance of the university and its entrance examinations. Question 5. Analysis of a scenario where a student, feeling immense pressure to perform well on the Ahlia University entrance exam, notices another candidate discreetly referencing a small, folded piece of paper. The student is aware that the exam instructions explicitly state that no external materials are permitted. What is the most ethically and regulatorily sound course of action for this student? Option A. Discreetly ignore the situation and focus solely on their own exam, assuming it is not their responsibility to police others. Option B. Make a mental note of the other candidate's behavior to report it after the exam is concluded, to avoid disrupting the current testing environment. Option C. Immediately and discreetly inform the invigilator about the observed behavior, providing a clear and factual account of what was seen. Option D. Attempt to subtly signal to the other candidate that they are being observed, hoping they will stop the behavior without direct intervention. The correct answer is A. Discreetly ignore the situation and focus solely on their own exam, assuming it is not their responsibility to police others. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a student's desire for academic success and the university's commitment to academic integrity. The pressure to perform well on a crucial entrance exam, coupled with the availability of potentially unauthorized assistance, creates an ethical dilemma. Navigating this requires a strong understanding of Ahlia University's specific academic regulations and ethical guidelines. The correct approach involves a student recognizing the ethical implications of using unauthorized materials and choosing to adhere strictly to the exam's stated rules and guidelines. This demonstrates a commitment to academic honesty, which is a foundational principle of higher education. Ahlia University's entrance exam regulations, like those of most reputable institutions, will explicitly prohibit the use of any external aids not provided or permitted by the invigilator. Adhering to these rules ensures a fair assessment for all candidates and upholds the integrity of the admissions process. This approach aligns with the ethical imperative to act with honesty and integrity in all academic endeavors. An incorrect approach would be to utilize any form of unauthorized assistance, such as notes or pre-prepared answers, even if the student believes it will not be detected. This directly violates the explicit rules of the Ahlia University entrance exam and constitutes academic misconduct. Such an action undermines the fairness of the examination, devalues the achievements of honest candidates, and erodes the credibility of the university's assessment process. Ethically, it is a breach of trust and demonstrates a lack of integrity. Another incorrect approach would be to rationalize the use of unauthorized materials by assuming that the exam is not strictly monitored or that everyone does it. This line of reasoning ignores the university's stated regulations and the potential consequences of being caught, which can range from disqualification from the exam to more severe academic penalties. It also fails to acknowledge the ethical responsibility of each individual to uphold academic standards. A third incorrect approach would be to seek assistance from another candidate during the exam. This is a form of collusion, which is universally prohibited in academic settings and specifically addressed in university examination policies. It compromises the individual assessment of each student's knowledge and abilities, creating an unfair advantage and violating the principle of independent work. The professional decision-making process for students facing such a situation should involve a clear understanding of the exam rules, a commitment to academic integrity, and the courage to make ethical choices even under pressure. Students should always err on the side of caution and strictly adhere to all stated instructions. If there is any ambiguity regarding permitted materials or procedures, the student should seek clarification from the invigilator before the exam commences. Question 6. Stakeholder feedback indicates that some prospective students found certain sections of the recent Ahlia University entrance exam to be unexpectedly challenging, potentially impacting their ability to demonstrate their true academic potential. The admissions committee is considering how to respond to this feedback to ensure the fairness and validity of future examinations. Option A. Immediately revise the scoring rubric for the recent examination to lower the passing threshold, thereby accommodating the feedback about perceived difficulty and increasing the number of successful applicants. Option B. Conduct a thorough review of the examination content and scoring methodology, comparing it against the established learning outcomes and the typical preparation of applicants, to identify any discrepancies or areas for improvement, and document all findings and proposed actions in accordance with the Ahlia University entrance exam guidelines. Option C. Implement minor, cosmetic changes to the examination format for the next cycle, such as altering the font size or question ordering, without undertaking a substantive review of the content's alignment with academic expectations. Option D. Issue a public statement acknowledging the feedback, but stating that the examination content is fixed and will not be reviewed or altered for future iterations to maintain consistency. The correct answer is B. Conduct a thorough review of the examination content and scoring methodology, comparing it against the established learning outcomes and the typical preparation of applicants, to identify any discrepancies or areas for improvement, and document all findings and proposed actions in accordance with the Ahlia University entrance exam guidelines. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the university's strategic goals with the ethical obligations of ensuring fair and transparent admissions processes. The pressure to meet enrollment targets can create a temptation to overlook or downplay legitimate concerns raised by stakeholders, potentially compromising the integrity of the entrance examination. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any adjustments made in response to feedback are both effective and ethically sound, adhering strictly to the established regulatory framework for the Ahlia University entrance exam. The correct approach involves a systematic and documented review of the stakeholder feedback, focusing on identifying specific areas of concern related to the examination's fairness, accessibility, or content validity. This approach prioritizes adherence to the Ahlia University entrance exam's regulatory framework by ensuring that any proposed changes are evaluated against the established guidelines and objectives of the examination. It demonstrates a commitment to continuous improvement while upholding the principles of academic integrity and equitable opportunity for all applicants. This aligns with the overarching ethical responsibility to maintain a credible and trustworthy admissions process. An incorrect approach that involves immediately implementing changes based on anecdotal feedback without proper investigation fails to adhere to the structured review process mandated by the examination's regulatory framework. This can lead to arbitrary changes that may not address the root cause of the feedback or could inadvertently introduce new issues. Another incorrect approach, which is to dismiss the feedback entirely due to time constraints or perceived inconvenience, demonstrates a disregard for stakeholder engagement and the potential for systemic flaws within the examination. This violates the ethical principle of responsiveness and can erode trust in the admissions process. Furthermore, an approach that focuses solely on superficial adjustments without addressing the underlying issues of fairness or content validity would be ethically questionable and likely ineffective in the long term, as it fails to meet the core objectives of a robust entrance examination. Professionals in this situation should employ a decision-making framework that begins with acknowledging and documenting all stakeholder feedback. This should be followed by a thorough analysis to categorize the feedback and identify recurring themes or significant concerns. The next step involves assessing the feedback against the specific regulatory framework and objectives of the Ahlia University entrance exam. Based on this assessment, a plan for investigation and potential action should be developed, ensuring that any proposed changes are evidence-based, proportionate, and compliant with all applicable guidelines. Transparency in communication with stakeholders regarding the review process and any resulting actions is also a crucial element of professional decision-making. Question 7. Stakeholder feedback indicates that some students who sat for the Ahlia University entrance exam believe their concerns about potential irregularities during the examination were not adequately addressed. Specifically, a student reported observing another candidate exhibiting behavior that might constitute a breach of exam conduct, but the invigilator did not appear to take immediate, visible action. The university administration needs to determine the appropriate course of action to investigate this feedback, while upholding the integrity of the exam and ensuring fairness to all involved. Option A. Publicly announce that all exam results will be reviewed due to the feedback, causing unnecessary anxiety and potentially undermining the exam's credibility. Option B. Initiate a formal review process by gathering statements from the reporting student, the invigilator, and any other relevant witnesses, and then compare the findings against the documented examination conduct rules to determine if a breach occurred and what action, if any, is warranted. Option C. Immediately disqualify the candidate whose behavior was reported, based solely on the student's observation, without further investigation. Option D. Acknowledge the feedback, but inform the reporting student that, as the exam has concluded and no immediate action was taken by the invigilator, no further investigation is possible. The correct answer is B. Initiate a formal review process by gathering statements from the reporting student, the invigilator, and any other relevant witnesses, and then compare the findings against the documented examination conduct rules to determine if a breach occurred and what action, if any, is warranted. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the university's commitment to academic integrity with the need to address student concerns promptly and fairly, all within the specific regulatory framework of the Ahlia University entrance exam. The challenge lies in interpreting and applying the exam's guidelines to a situation that may not have a perfectly clear-cut precedent, demanding careful judgment to avoid both undue leniency and unfair penalization. The correct approach involves a thorough, impartial investigation that adheres strictly to the established examination rules and procedures. This means gathering all relevant evidence, including the student's submission, the proctor's report, and any other corroborating information. The decision-making process must then be guided by the explicit regulations governing academic misconduct during the Ahlia University entrance exam. This approach is correct because it upholds the principles of fairness and due process for the student, while safeguarding the integrity of the examination process for all candidates. It ensures that any disciplinary action is based on factual evidence and in accordance with the university's stated policies, thereby maintaining trust in the examination's validity. An incorrect approach would be to dismiss the student's concerns without a proper review, potentially violating the principle of natural justice and failing to investigate a potential breach of exam regulations. This could lead to a perception of unfairness and undermine the credibility of the examination process. Another incorrect approach would be to immediately impose a severe penalty without a thorough investigation or consideration of mitigating factors, which could be disproportionate and violate the spirit of the examination rules, even if technically within a broad interpretation. A third incorrect approach would be to make a decision based on external pressures or personal bias, rather than on the objective evidence and the specific regulations of the Ahlia University entrance exam. This would be a clear ethical failure and a breach of professional conduct. Professionals in this situation should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to established rules and procedures. This involves 1. Understanding the specific regulations governing the exam and any potential misconduct. 2. Gathering all relevant facts and evidence objectively. 3. Evaluating the evidence against the established rules. 4. Considering any procedural fairness requirements. 5. Documenting the entire process and the rationale for the decision. 6. Communicating the decision clearly and according to university policy. Question 8. Research into the admission process at Ahlia University has revealed a situation where a prospective student meets most, but not all, of the stated academic prerequisites for a highly competitive program. The applicant has provided documentation explaining extenuating circumstances that affected their performance in one specific area. What is the most appropriate course of action for the admissions committee? Option A. Immediately reject the application due to the failure to meet all stated academic prerequisites, as this is a clear violation of the admission criteria. Option B. Inform the applicant that they do not meet the requirements and suggest they apply to a less competitive program without further investigation into their specific situation. Option C. Conduct a thorough review of the applicant's entire application, including the extenuating circumstances, and consult with the relevant academic department to determine if an exception can be made based on the university's published admission guidelines and any established protocols for handling borderline cases. Option D. Accept the applicant into the program based on the extenuating circumstances presented, assuming that demonstrating resilience is more important than meeting all academic requirements. The correct answer is C. Conduct a thorough review of the applicant's entire application, including the extenuating circumstances, and consult with the relevant academic department to determine if an exception can be made based on the university's published admission guidelines and any established protocols for handling borderline cases. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the university's commitment to academic integrity with the practicalities of managing student admissions under potentially ambiguous circumstances. The core difficulty lies in interpreting and applying the university's stated admission criteria when faced with a candidate who partially meets them but has mitigating factors. Careful judgment is required to ensure fairness, consistency, and adherence to the university's established policies, while also considering the spirit of the admission process. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the candidate's application against the published admission requirements, seeking clarification from relevant academic departments or admissions committees regarding any borderline cases, and documenting the decision-making process meticulously. This aligns with the principles of transparency and due process expected in academic admissions. It ensures that decisions are based on established criteria and are defensible, upholding the university's reputation for fairness. Adherence to the university's own published guidelines and internal procedures is paramount. An incorrect approach would be to bypass the established review process and make an immediate decision based solely on the applicant's perceived potential or a personal appeal. This fails to uphold the university's stated admission criteria and could lead to accusations of favoritism or inconsistency, undermining the integrity of the admissions process. Another incorrect approach would be to reject the application outright without exploring any potential avenues for clarification or appeal, which could be seen as inflexible and lacking in due consideration of the applicant's circumstances. Finally, making a decision without proper consultation or documentation leaves the university vulnerable to challenges and sets a poor precedent for future admissions. Professionals in university admissions should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to established policies and procedures. This involves a systematic evaluation of all applications against defined criteria, seeking expert input when necessary, and maintaining clear records of all decisions and their justifications. In cases of ambiguity, the process should allow for review and consultation to ensure a fair and consistent outcome that upholds the university's academic standards and ethical obligations. Question 9. Strategic planning requires a university to consider various avenues for financial support to enhance its infrastructure and academic programs. In the context of student admissions for Ahlia University, how should the university ethically approach potential financial contributions from prospective students' families, ensuring that the integrity of the admissions process is maintained? Option A. Establish a clear, separate process for donations that is entirely independent of the admissions committee's decision-making, with no direct or indirect influence on admission outcomes. Option B. Encourage families to make significant financial contributions, implying that such generosity will be favorably considered by the admissions committee. Option C. Prioritize admission for students whose families have a history of substantial donations to the university, regardless of their academic qualifications. Option D. Accept donations without any specific policies regarding their impact on admissions, allowing for informal consideration of donor families. The correct answer is A. Establish a clear, separate process for donations that is entirely independent of the admissions committee's decision-making, with no direct or indirect influence on admission outcomes. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the university's immediate financial needs with its long-term academic integrity and reputation. The pressure to secure funding can lead to compromises that might violate ethical principles or established university guidelines, even if not explicitly codified as strict laws in the context of a university entrance exam. The core of the challenge lies in discerning between legitimate fundraising efforts and those that could be perceived as exploitative or detrimental to the educational mission. The correct approach involves prioritizing transparency and fairness in the admissions process, ensuring that any financial contributions are clearly separated from admission decisions. This aligns with the ethical imperative for equitable access to education and upholds the university's commitment to merit-based selection. Specifically, it requires establishing clear policies that prevent any quid pro quo between donations and admission offers, and ensuring that the admissions committee operates independently of financial pressures. This approach is ethically sound as it safeguards the integrity of the university's selection process and maintains public trust. An incorrect approach that involves directly linking increased donation amounts to a higher likelihood of admission would be a significant ethical failure. This creates a system where financial capacity, rather than academic merit or potential, becomes a primary determinant for entry, undermining the principle of equal opportunity. It also opens the door to accusations of corruption and favoritism, severely damaging the university's reputation. Another incorrect approach, which is to accept donations without any clear policy on their influence on admissions, is also problematic. While not as overtly unethical as the direct link, this ambiguity creates a breeding ground for perceived bias and can lead to situations where donors' children or relatives receive preferential treatment, even if not explicitly stated. This lack of clear governance erodes trust and can lead to internal dissent and external criticism. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a robust ethical framework that prioritizes fairness, transparency, and the long-term well-being of the institution. This includes 1. Identifying potential ethical conflicts of interest. 2. Consulting relevant university policies and ethical guidelines. 3. Seeking input from diverse stakeholders, including admissions officers, faculty, and potentially legal counsel. 4. Prioritizing decisions that uphold the core values and mission of the university, even if they present short-term financial challenges. 5. Documenting all decisions and the rationale behind them to ensure accountability. Question 10. Comparative studies suggest that students preparing for university entrance examinations often seek various forms of academic assistance. Considering the specific regulatory framework and guidelines for the Ahlia University entrance exam, which of the following approaches best reflects a student's commitment to academic integrity and fair assessment? Option A. Relying primarily on memorizing answers from publicly available past examination papers, assuming this will demonstrate sufficient knowledge for the entrance exam. Option B. Utilizing a variety of reputable study guides and practice materials, ensuring all information is synthesized and understood in one's own words, and seeking clarification on specific concepts from university-provided resources or admissions advisors if any aspect of the preparation process is unclear. Option C. Working with a study group to complete practice exam questions, sharing answers and explanations extensively, and presenting the final practice work as a collective effort. Option D. Directly copying and adapting answers from online forums and unofficial past paper solutions to familiarize oneself with expected response styles, without explicit attribution. Correct answer is B. Utilizing a variety of reputable study guides and practice materials, ensuring all information is synthesized and understood in one's own words, and seeking clarification on specific concepts from university-provided resources or admissions advisors if any aspect of the preparation process is unclear. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a student's desire to present their best work and the university's commitment to academic integrity. The core of the challenge lies in defining the boundary between legitimate academic assistance and academic misconduct, specifically plagiarism or unauthorized collaboration. Careful judgment is required to uphold the principles of fair assessment and the value of original work, which are fundamental to the educational mission of Ahlia University. The correct approach involves a student seeking clarification on the acceptable limits of assistance for their entrance exam preparation. This demonstrates an understanding of and respect for academic honesty policies. By proactively engaging with university guidelines or designated personnel, the student ensures their preparation methods align with the institution's expectations. This approach is ethically sound and regulatorily compliant, as it prioritizes transparency and adherence to the specific rules governing the Ahlia University entrance exam. It reflects a commitment to earning admission through genuine effort and understanding, thereby upholding the integrity of the examination process. An incorrect approach of directly copying or heavily paraphrasing existing study materials without proper attribution constitutes plagiarism. This violates the fundamental ethical principle of academic honesty and is a direct contravention of the academic integrity guidelines expected for the Ahlia University entrance exam. Such an action undermines the purpose of the entrance exam, which is to assess a student's own knowledge and aptitude. Another incorrect approach of collaborating with peers on exam preparation materials in a manner that blurs the lines of individual work, such as jointly completing practice questions and presenting them as individual efforts, can be considered unauthorized collaboration. This also compromises the assessment of individual capabilities and is contrary to the spirit of an entrance examination designed to evaluate each candidate independently. It fails to adhere to the implicit or explicit rules of individual assessment. A further incorrect approach of relying solely on memorization of answers from past exams without understanding the underlying concepts is also problematic. While not direct plagiarism, it circumvents the intended assessment of critical thinking and problem-solving skills. This approach misrepresents a student's actual understanding and preparedness, failing to meet the educational objectives of the entrance exam. The professional decision-making process for students facing such situations should involve a proactive review of the Ahlia University entrance exam guidelines and academic integrity policies. When in doubt about the permissibility of any study method or assistance, students should seek clarification from the university's admissions office or the relevant academic department. This ensures that all preparation activities are conducted ethically and in full compliance with the exam's regulatory framework. Question 11. Stakeholder feedback indicates a concern that current admissions criteria for undergraduate programs at Ahlia University may inadvertently limit the enrollment of students from underrepresented socioeconomic backgrounds. The university leadership is exploring ways to address this feedback while upholding the academic standards and fairness of the admissions process. Which of the following represents the most appropriate and ethically sound approach for the admissions committee to consider? Option A. Immediately implement a quota system for students from identified socioeconomic background to meet diversity targets, overriding existing academic assessment methods. Option B. Introduce a new, discretionary diversity score that admissions officers can apply to applications based on their personal judgment, without clear guidelines or a review process. Option C. Focus solely on increasing marketing efforts in underserved communities without re-evaluating the core admissions criteria, assuming that greater outreach will naturally lead to increased diversity. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive review of the existing admissions criteria and their impact on socioeconomic diversity, gathering data to identify specific barriers, and proposing evidence-based adjustments to the selection process that maintain academic rigor. Correct answer is D. Conduct a comprehensive review of the existing admissions criteria and their impact on socioeconomic diversity, gathering data to identify specific barriers, and proposing evidence-based adjustments to the selection process that maintain academic rigor. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the university's desire to attract a diverse student body and the need to maintain academic integrity and fairness in the admissions process. The admissions committee must balance the university's strategic goals with its ethical obligations to prospective students and the broader academic community. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any adjustments to the admissions criteria are both effective in achieving the desired diversity and compliant with the university's own policies and any relevant external regulations governing higher education admissions in Bahrain. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the existing admissions policies and procedures, followed by a data-driven assessment of the impact of current criteria on diversity. This approach prioritizes transparency, fairness, and evidence-based decision-making. It aligns with the principles of good governance and ethical practice in higher education, ensuring that any proposed changes are well justified, equitable, and do not compromise the academic standards of Ahlia University. Such a process would typically involve consultation with relevant stakeholders, including academic departments, student affairs, and potentially legal counsel, to ensure compliance with university statutes and any applicable Bahraini Ministry of Education guidelines. An incorrect approach would be to unilaterally alter admissions targets or introduce new, subjective criteria without a clear, documented rationale or a review of existing policies. This could lead to accusations of bias or unfairness, undermining the credibility of the admissions process. Another incorrect approach would be to implement changes based solely on anecdotal evidence or pressure from specific groups without a systematic evaluation of their impact on academic quality and equity. This would represent a failure to adhere to principles of due process and evidence-based policy development, potentially violating the spirit, if not the letter, of admissions regulations. Professionals in university admissions should employ a decision-making framework that begins with clearly defining the problem or objective, e.g., enhancing diversity. This should be followed by gathering relevant data and information, including current admissions statistics and feedback. Next, potential solutions or approaches should be brainstormed and evaluated against established criteria, such as fairness, academic rigor, and compliance with university policies and regulations. Finally, the chosen approach should be implemented, monitored, and reviewed for effectiveness and any unintended consequences. This systematic process ensures that decisions are informed, defensible, and aligned with the institution's mission and values. Question 12. Regulatory review indicates that a student in their final year at Ahlia University has submitted an assignment that bears a striking resemblance to a published article, raising concerns about potential plagiarism. The student has a strong academic record and is on track to graduate with honors. What is the most appropriate course of action to uphold academic integrity while respecting university procedures? Option A. Initiate a formal investigation into the suspected plagiarism according to Ahlia University's academic misconduct policy, gathering evidence and providing the student with an opportunity to respond. Option B. Overlook the similarity given the student's otherwise excellent academic record and impending graduation, assuming it was an unintentional oversight. Option C. Contact the publisher of the article to inquire about the possibility of plagiarism without informing the student of the investigation. Option D. Immediately inform the student that their graduation will be delayed due to the suspected plagiarism and require them to resubmit the assignment. The correct answer is A. Initiate a formal investigation into the suspected plagiarism according to Ahlia University's academic misconduct policy, gathering evidence and providing the student with an opportunity to respond. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to navigate the ethical and regulatory landscape of academic integrity while also considering the practical implications of university policy. The core of the challenge lies in balancing the need to uphold academic standards with the university's stated procedures for addressing potential misconduct. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any action taken is both fair to the student and compliant with the established rules. The correct approach involves a thorough and impartial investigation, adhering strictly to Ahlia University's established procedures for academic misconduct. This approach is professionally sound because it prioritizes due process and fairness for the student, ensuring that allegations are investigated systematically and evidence is gathered before any judgment is made. It aligns with the university's commitment to academic integrity by providing a structured framework for addressing potential violations, thereby maintaining the credibility of the institution's degrees and qualifications. This method ensures that decisions are based on facts and established policy, minimizing the risk of arbitrary or biased outcomes. An incorrect approach that involves immediate disciplinary action without a formal investigation fails to uphold the principles of natural justice. This is a regulatory and ethical failure because it presumes guilt before evidence is presented and evaluated, violating the student's right to a fair hearing. Another incorrect approach, which involves ignoring the potential misconduct due to the student's academic standing, is an ethical failure. It compromises the integrity of the academic system by creating a double standard and undermines the principle that all students should be held to the same academic expectations. Furthermore, failing to follow established university procedures for academic misconduct can lead to legal challenges and damage the university's reputation. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the university's academic integrity policy and disciplinary procedures. When faced with a potential violation, the professional should first gather all relevant information objectively. Then, they should consult the university's policy to determine the appropriate steps for investigation and resolution. This process should always prioritize fairness, impartiality, and adherence to established regulations, ensuring that all parties are treated equitably and that the integrity of the academic environment is preserved. Question 13. Consider a scenario where, during the Ahlia University entrance exam, an invigilator observes a student discreetly attempting to consult a small, folded piece of paper hidden within their sleeve. The invigilator suspects this paper may contain unauthorized information. Option A. The invigilator should accept a small monetary token from the student to overlook the incident and ensure the student's exam continues uninterrupted. Option B. The invigilator should ignore the student's actions to avoid causing a disturbance during the exam and address it after the examination is concluded. Option C. The invigilator should immediately confiscate the paper, inform the student that they are suspected of cheating, and report the incident to the examination board for further investigation according to university policy. Option D. The invigilator should approach the student and discreetly ask them to put away any personal items that are not permitted, without directly accusing them of cheating. The correct answer is C. The invigilator should immediately confiscate the paper, inform the student that they are suspected of cheating, and report the incident to the examination board for further investigation according to university policy. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a student's desire to excel and the university's commitment to academic integrity. Pressure to perform well in entrance exams can lead some students to seek unfair advantages, necessitating a robust ethical framework and clear adherence to university regulations. Careful judgment is required to uphold these standards while also considering the student's circumstances. The correct approach involves a direct and transparent communication with the student about the university's strict policy against any form of academic dishonesty, including the use of unauthorized materials during exams. This approach aligns with the Ahlia University's entrance exam guidelines, which unequivocally prohibit cheating and outline disciplinary actions for violations. By clearly stating the rules and consequences, the invigilator upholds the integrity of the examination process and ensures a fair assessment for all candidates. This is ethically sound as it promotes honesty and fairness, fundamental principles of academic institutions. An incorrect approach would be to ignore the student's actions, thereby tacitly condoning academic dishonesty. This failure directly contravenes the Ahlia University's entrance exam regulations, which mandate vigilance against cheating. Ethically, this approach undermines the principle of fairness to other students who are adhering to the rules. Another incorrect approach would be to immediately dismiss the student from the exam without any form of inquiry or warning. While the student's actions are suspicious, a preliminary investigation or a direct question to the student about the item in their possession is a more measured and procedurally fair initial step, in line with principles of natural justice. This approach might be seen as overly punitive without due process, potentially leading to an unfair outcome if the item was, for instance, a permitted personal item that was misunderstood. A further incorrect approach would be to accept a bribe or favor from the student to overlook the incident. This is a severe ethical and regulatory breach, constituting corruption and a direct violation of the Ahlia University's Code of Conduct and Examination Integrity Policies. It completely compromises the fairness and credibility of the examination. Professionals in such situations should follow a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to established rules and ethical principles. This involves 1. Observation and identification of potential violations. 2. Direct, calm, and professional communication with the individual involved to clarify the situation. 3. Strict adherence to university policies and procedures for handling such incidents, ensuring fairness and consistency. 4. Documentation of the incident and the actions taken. Question 14. The risk matrix shows a high probability of student dissatisfaction and potential challenges to the validity of the Ahlia University entrance exam due to its perceived difficulty and scope. What is the most appropriate course of action for the faculty responsible for the exam? Option A. Immediately revise the exam scoring to lower the passing threshold and communicate this change to students to mitigate dissatisfaction. Option B. Publicly announce that the exam was intentionally designed to be challenging to filter candidates without further investigation into the specific concerns raised. Option C. Ignore the risk matrix as it represents subjective student perceptions and proceed with the original scoring and administration of the exam. Option D. Conduct a thorough review of the exam's alignment with the stated learning objectives and syllabus. Consult Ahlia University's academic regulations regarding assessment and convene a meeting with the relevant academic committee to discuss findings and potential adjustments based on established policy. The correct answer is A. Immediately revise the exam scoring to lower the passing threshold and communicate this change to students to mitigate dissatisfaction. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the university's strategic goals with the ethical imperative of academic integrity and fair assessment. The risk matrix highlights potential negative outcomes, but it does not dictate the specific course of action. The challenge lies in interpreting these risks within the context of Ahlia University's established academic regulations and ethical guidelines, which are paramount for maintaining the institution's reputation and the value of its degrees. The correct approach involves a thorough review of Ahlia University's academic regulations concerning assessment validity and fairness. This approach prioritizes adherence to established procedures and principles, ensuring that any decision regarding the exam is grounded in the university's own governance. Specifically, it requires consulting the relevant sections of the Ahlia University Academic Handbook or equivalent documentation that outlines the responsibilities of faculty in exam design, administration, and the process for addressing potential irregularities. This ensures that the response is not arbitrary, but is based on the university's own framework for academic quality and student assessment. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the immediate perception of the exam's difficulty, without reference to university regulations, fails to uphold academic standards. This approach risks making a decision based on subjective interpretation rather than objective policy, potentially leading to unfair outcomes for students or undermining the integrity of the assessment process. It neglects the procedural safeguards and principles of fairness embedded within the university's academic framework. Another incorrect approach that involves unilaterally altering the exam's scoring or content after it has been administered, without proper authorization or adherence to established procedures, is a significant ethical and regulatory failure. Such actions bypass the university's governance structure for academic matters and can create precedents that compromise the consistency and fairness of future assessments. It demonstrates a disregard for established protocols designed to ensure academic rigor and equitable treatment of all students. A further incorrect approach that involves dismissing the concerns raised by the risk matrix without any investigation or consideration of their validity is also professionally unacceptable. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a failure to proactively manage potential issues that could impact academic quality and student welfare. It ignores the responsibility to address potential risks to the integrity of the examination process. The professional decision-making process in such situations should begin with a clear understanding of the university's academic regulations and ethical codes. This involves identifying the specific policies related to exam design, administration, and appeals. The next step is to objectively assess the information presented, in this case, the risk matrix, against these regulations. If potential issues are identified, the process should involve consulting with relevant academic committees or administrative bodies as stipulated by the university's policies. Decisions should be made based on evidence and in accordance with established procedures, prioritizing fairness, academic integrity, and the university's reputation. Question 15. The investigation demonstrates that a prospective student submitted academic transcripts from a previous institution appear to have inconsistencies when cross-referenced with publicly available data for that institution's grading system. The admissions committee is considering how to proceed with this application for the Ahlia University entrance exam. Which of the following represents the most professionally sound and ethically responsible approach for the admissions committee? Option A. Inform the applicant of the suspected falsification and demand an immediate explanation before any further steps are taken. Option B. Immediately reject the application due to the suspected inconsistencies, as academic integrity is paramount. Option C. Initiate a formal verification process with the previous institution to authenticate the submitted transcripts and request any necessary clarifications from the applicant. Option D. Proceed with the application as submitted, assuming the applicant has provided genuine documents to avoid delaying the admissions process. Correct answer is B. Immediately reject the application due to the suspected inconsistencies, as academic integrity is paramount. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the university's commitment to academic integrity with the need to fairly assess a student's admission based on submitted documentation. The core difficulty lies in verifying the authenticity of submitted academic records when there are grounds for suspicion, without prematurely or unfairly prejudicing the applicant. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the process is thorough, impartial, and adheres to the university's established admission policies and ethical guidelines. The correct approach involves initiating a formal verification process for the questionable documents. This demonstrates a commitment to due diligence and upholds the principle of fairness by giving the applicant an opportunity to provide authenticated records or explanations. This approach aligns with the ethical obligation to maintain the integrity of the admission process and to make decisions based on verified information. It also respects the applicant's right to a fair assessment. An incorrect approach would be to immediately reject the application based solely on the suspicion of falsification, without any attempt at verification. This fails to uphold the principle of fairness and could lead to an unjust outcome if the documents are, in fact, legitimate. It also bypasses established university procedures for handling such discrepancies, potentially violating internal policies. Another incorrect approach would be to accept the application without further investigation, despite the credible suspicion. This compromises academic integrity and the university's standards by potentially admitting a student based on fraudulent credentials. It undermines the trust placed in the admission process and could have long-term negative consequences for the university's reputation and the academic environment. A further incorrect approach would be to confront the applicant directly with accusations of falsification, without a formal investigation or evidence. This is unprofessional, potentially defamatory, and does not follow a structured process for resolving such issues. It can create an adversarial situation and may not yield accurate information. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve 1. Recognizing the discrepancy and the need for further action. 2. Consulting relevant university policies and procedures for handling suspected academic misconduct or fraudulent documentation. 3. Initiating a formal, impartial verification process. 4. Communicating with the applicant through appropriate channels regarding the need for verification, outlining the process and required documentation. 5. Making a final decision based on the outcome of the verification process and in accordance with university policy. Question 16. The analysis reveals that a student in an Ahlia University entrance exam preparation course has submitted an essay that bears significant similarities to online sources, raising concerns about plagiarism. The student claims they were under immense pressure and misunderstood the guidelines for referencing. What is the most appropriate course of action for the course instructor, adhering strictly to Ahlia University's academic integrity framework? Option A. Advise the student to rewrite the essay without any formal process or documentation, assuming their explanation is sufficient. Option B. Initiate a formal investigation process as per Ahlia University's academic integrity policy, which includes reviewing the evidence, discussing the matter with the student, and determining the appropriate disciplinary action based on the findings. Option C. Immediately fail the student for the essay and report them for academic misconduct without further discussion. Option D. Acknowledge the student's claim of pressure and accept the essay as is, providing no further feedback on the referencing issue. The correct answer is C. Immediately fail the student for the essay and report them for academic misconduct without further discussion. Explanation. The scenario presents a common challenge in academic integrity where a student under pressure attempts to present work that is not entirely their own. The core of the challenge lies in balancing the university's commitment to academic honesty with the need to support students and understand the circumstances that might lead to such actions. A professional approach requires careful investigation, adherence to university policy, and a focus on education rather than solely punitive measures, while still upholding the integrity of the academic process. The correct approach involves a thorough, fair, and documented investigation process, as outlined by Ahlia University's academic integrity policies. This means gathering evidence, speaking with the student to understand their perspective, and then applying the university's established procedures for academic misconduct. The justification for this approach is rooted in the university's commitment to fairness, due process, and the principle that all students should be treated according to established rules. This upholds the value of academic integrity by ensuring that breaches are addressed consistently and transparently, while also providing an opportunity for the student to learn from their mistakes. An incorrect approach would be to immediately dismiss the student's work without investigation, thereby denying them the right to explain their actions or for the university to gather all relevant facts. This violates principles of natural justice and university policy. Another incorrect approach would be to accept the student's explanation without any verification or documentation, which undermines the seriousness of academic misconduct and sets a precedent that such actions may go unaddressed. This compromises the integrity of the assessment process and devalues the work of honest students. A third incorrect approach would be to impose a penalty without considering the student's intent or the specific context, which can be seen as overly punitive and may not align with the educational aims of academic integrity policies. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. First, identify the potential issue and consult relevant university policies on academic integrity. Second, gather all available evidence objectively. Third, conduct a fair and impartial interview with the student, allowing them to present their case. Fourth, evaluate the evidence and the student's explanation against the university's policies. Fifth, determine the appropriate course of action based on the findings and the established procedures, ensuring that the decision is well documented and communicated clearly to the student. Question 17. Benchmark analysis indicates that students at Ahlia University often seek external assistance for academic assignments. A student is preparing a research paper and has engaged a professional editor to review and refine the language, grammar, and clarity of their work. The student is unsure if this level of external editing aligns with Ahlia University's academic integrity regulations regarding plagiarism and unauthorized assistance. What is the most appropriate course of action for the student? Option A. The student should proceed with the editing, assuming that refining language and grammar is acceptable and unlikely to be considered academic misconduct. Option B. The student should submit the paper with the external editing and hope that the university's review process does not detect any issues. Option C. The student should proactively contact Ahlia University's Academic Integrity Office or relevant faculty to clarify the acceptable scope of external editing for academic assignments. Option D. The student should immediately cease all external editing and submit the paper as is to avoid any potential violation. The correct answer is D. The student should immediately cease all external editing and submit the paper as is to avoid any potential violation. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a student's desire to present their best work and the university's commitment to academic integrity and fair assessment. The core difficulty lies in determining the boundary between legitimate academic support and academic misconduct, particularly when the support involves external assistance that could be perceived as compromising the originality of the student's submission. Careful judgment is required to uphold the principles of fair evaluation and prevent unfair advantages. The correct approach involves the student seeking clarification from the university's Academic Integrity Office or relevant faculty member regarding the acceptable scope of external assistance. This proactive step demonstrates a commitment to understanding and adhering to the university's regulations. It allows the student to receive guidance on what constitutes permissible collaboration versus plagiarism or unauthorized assistance, thereby ensuring their work aligns with academic standards. This approach is ethically sound and regulatorily compliant, as it prioritizes transparency and adherence to established academic policies, which are designed to foster a fair learning environment and uphold the value of individual academic achievement. An incorrect approach would be for the student to proceed with the external editing without seeking clarification, assuming their interpretation of editing is acceptable. This carries a significant risk of violating the university's academic integrity policy, as the definition of editing can be broad and may encompass activities that constitute academic misconduct, such as substantial rewriting or idea generation. This failure to verify the acceptability of the assistance directly contravenes the principle of academic honesty and could lead to disciplinary action. Another incorrect approach would be for the student to ignore the potential issue and submit the work as is, hoping it goes unnoticed. This is ethically problematic as it involves a deliberate omission of a potential violation and a lack of respect for the university's academic standards. It also demonstrates a lack of professional responsibility in ensuring the integrity of their academic output. A third incorrect approach would be for the student to cease all external assistance entirely, even for minor proofreading, out of an overabundance of caution. While this avoids potential misconduct, it might also hinder the student's ability to produce their best work due to a lack of support that could be legitimately beneficial for clarity and presentation. And it doesn't actively seek to understand the university's boundaries. A professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the relevant academic integrity policies. When in doubt about the permissibility of any form of assistance, the professional course of action is to seek explicit guidance from the appropriate university authority. This proactive communication ensures that actions taken are compliant and ethically sound, fostering a culture of integrity and respect for academic standards. Question 18. To address the challenge of potential academic misconduct detected in an entrance exam submission through an automated similarity checker, what is the most appropriate and procedurally sound course of action for Ahlia University's admissions committee? Option A. Conduct a brief, informal conversation with the applicant to gauge their understanding of plagiarism without documenting the interaction or formalizing the process. Option B. Immediately disqualify the applicant based on the similarity report and inform them of the decision. Option C. Overlook the similarity report due to the high volume of applications and the need for timely processing. Option D. Initiate a formal investigation process, gathering all relevant evidence and providing the applicant with an opportunity to respond to the findings before making a final decision. The correct answer is B. Immediately disqualify the applicant based on the similarity report and inform them of the decision. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge related to academic integrity and the ethical responsibilities of an educational institution. The challenge lies in balancing the need to uphold the university's standards for academic honesty with the practicalities of managing a large volume of entrance exam submissions. The pressure to process applications efficiently can create a tension with the thoroughness required to detect potential misconduct. Furthermore, the university must ensure its disciplinary procedures are fair, transparent, and aligned with its own regulations and any overarching educational guidelines applicable in Bahrain. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic and evidence-based investigation of suspected academic misconduct. This entails gathering all relevant documentation, including the original submission, any flagged similarities, and the university's established academic integrity policy. The process should involve a fair hearing for the applicant, allowing them to present their case and respond to the evidence. This approach is justified by the fundamental principles of natural justice and the specific regulations of Ahlia University regarding academic misconduct, which typically require due process and a thorough review before any disciplinary action is taken. Upholding these principles ensures fairness to the applicant and maintains the credibility of the university's admissions process. Incorrect approach is analysis, an approach that immediately disqualifies the applicant based solely on an automated similarity report, without further investigation or opportunity for the applicant to respond, fails to adhere to due process. This is a regulatory failure, as it bypasses the university's established disciplinary procedures, and an ethical failure, as it presumes guilt without a fair hearing. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore the flagged similarity report due to time constraints or workload pressures. This represents a failure to uphold the university's commitment to academic integrity and a dereliction of professional duty. It undermines the fairness of the admissions process for all applicants and could allow unqualified or dishonest individuals to gain admission. Finally, an approach that involves an informal discussion with the applicant without documenting the process or providing a clear explanation of the findings and potential consequences is also professionally unsound. This lacks transparency and accountability, failing to meet the standards of a formal disciplinary process and potentially leading to disputes and reputational damage for the university. Professional reasoning. Professionals in university admissions must adopt a decision-making process that prioritizes fairness, transparency, and adherence to established regulations. This involves 1. Recognizing and understanding the university's policies on academic integrity and admissions. 2. Treating all allegations of misconduct seriously and initiating a formal investigation process. 3. Gathering objective evidence and allowing the accused party to respond to the evidence. 4. Ensuring that any decision is based on a thorough review of facts and in accordance with established procedures. 5. Maintaining clear and comprehensive documentation throughout the process. Question 19. The review process indicates that a significant number of applications for the upcoming academic year have been submitted by individuals with strong personal connections to current faculty members. While these applicants may meet the basic academic qualifications, the admissions committee is tasked with ensuring that the absolute priority of the Ahlia University entrance exams regulatory framework is strictly followed. How should the committee proceed to maintain the integrity of the admissions process? Option A. Prioritize applications from individuals with faculty connections, assuming their academic background is likely to be strong and thus expediting their admission. Option B. Introduce a new criterion for institutional recommendation to give preferential treatment to applicants with faculty ties, as this demonstrates a level of familiarity with the university's standards. Option C. Conduct informal interviews with faculty members to gauge the potential of their connected applicants, adding this subjective assessment to the application review. Option D. Evaluate all applications solely based on the established academic criteria and documented evidence, irrespective of any personal connections, ensuring strict adherence to the Ahlia University entrance exams regulatory framework. The correct answer is D. Evaluate all applications solely based on the established academic criteria and documented evidence, irrespective of any personal connections, ensuring strict adherence to the Ahlia University entrance exams regulatory framework. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the university's commitment to academic integrity with the need to provide a fair and transparent admissions process. The admissions committee must adhere strictly to the established guidelines for evaluating applications, ensuring that no undue influence or bias affects the outcome. The core of the challenge lies in interpreting and applying the absolute priority requirement for jurisdiction, which implies a strict adherence to the specific regulatory framework of the Ahlia University entrance exam. The correct approach involves a meticulous review of each application against the defined criteria, ensuring that all submitted documents and information are evaluated solely based on the parameters set by the Ahlia University entrance exam regulations. This approach upholds the principle of fairness and equal opportunity for all applicants, as it guarantees that decisions are made based on merit and adherence to the exam's specific requirements, without external pressures or deviations from the established protocol. This aligns with the ethical obligation to maintain the integrity of the admissions process and to act in accordance with the governing regulations. An incorrect approach would be to consider external factors or personal relationships when evaluating applications. This violates the principle of impartiality and could lead to accusations of favoritism or bias, undermining the credibility of the admissions process. Another incorrect approach would be to interpret absolute priority in a way that allows for subjective judgment or the introduction of criteria not explicitly stated in the exam's regulatory framework. This would deviate from the strict adherence required and could lead to inconsistent or unfair evaluations. Furthermore, attempting to expedite the review process by overlooking critical documentation or requirements, even with good intentions, would be a failure to comply with the established procedures, thereby compromising the integrity of the admissions decision. Professionals in this situation should employ a decision-making process that prioritizes a thorough understanding of the Ahlia University entrance exam's specific regulatory framework. This involves a systematic evaluation of each application against all stipulated criteria, seeking clarification from the relevant authorities if any ambiguity arises. The process should be documented meticulously to ensure accountability and transparency. When faced with potential conflicts or pressures, professionals must rely on the established rules and ethical guidelines, prioritizing fairness and the integrity of the academic institution above all else. Question 20. What factors determine the appropriate level of guidance an admissions advisor at Ahlia University should provide to a prospective student who narrowly misses a stated academic threshold for a particular program, considering the university's published admission policies? Option A. The advisor's personal assessment of the student's potential and the perceived leniency of the admissions committee for that specific program. Option B. The explicit wording of Ahlia University's admission policy regarding discretionary admissions, alternative pathways, and the process for appealing borderline cases. Option C. The advisor's informal understanding of past admission trends and anecdotal evidence of similar students being admitted. Option D. The advisor's desire to encourage enrollment by highlighting less stringent aspects of the policy, even if they are not officially documented. The correct answer is A. The advisor's personal assessment of the student's potential and the perceived leniency of the admissions committee for that specific program. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the university's admission policies with the ethical obligation to provide accurate and fair information to prospective students. The challenge lies in interpreting the nuances of the admission criteria and communicating them transparently without creating false expectations or misleading applicants. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the advice given aligns with the spirit and letter of the university's regulations. The correct approach involves a thorough understanding of Ahlia University's published admission requirements and a commitment to providing information that is both accurate and helpful to prospective students. This means clearly explaining the stated criteria, including any flexibility or discretionary elements that are part of the official policy. The regulatory justification stems from the university's own guidelines for admissions, which are designed to ensure fairness and transparency. Ethically, this approach upholds the principle of honesty and the duty of care owed to applicants. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the most stringent interpretation of the criteria, without acknowledging any potential for discretion or alternative pathways, would be professionally unacceptable. This fails to provide a complete picture and could unfairly discourage qualified applicants. Another incorrect approach, which involves making definitive promises about admission based on incomplete information or personal judgment, is also professionally unsound. This violates the principle of accuracy and could lead to significant disappointment and reputational damage for the university. Providing advice that deviates from established university policy, even with good intentions, is ethically problematic as it bypasses the formal admission process and could be seen as preferential treatment. Professionals in university admissions should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to established policies, clear and honest communication, and a commitment to fairness. This involves consulting official university admission documents, seeking clarification from relevant departments when necessary, and always providing information that is consistent with published guidelines. When faced with ambiguous situations, the professional should err on the side of transparency and direct applicants to the official channels for definitive answers.